You're listening to DraftKings Network.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz podcast.
Increíble.
In progress.
Wow. I don't know what happened there, but I'm going to restart.
We are recording.
Increíble is what I would say because I was watching the Messi and Inter Miami versus Cincinnati semifinal in the Lamar Hunt U.S. Open Cup and watching it on Telemundo, and man, that was exciting. That was crazy.
They had Andres Cantor on the call, right?
Yeah.
On Telemundo? Yeah, it was very exciting. And I truly implore people that are just curious about soccer and curious about this Messi spectacle. I do think that this whole experiment is winning fans over just because of how bonkers these games have gone. Mm-hmm. They've been highly entertaining. They're bad enough defensively that they need to lean on Messi to be special. And in the 98th minute, you have a long ball delivered by Lionel Messi, which defies logic given the scenario. You could give good soccer players 300 attempts to deliver that ball with that precision over the defender, under the keeper, and right on the noggin of Campana, who redeemed himself quite nicely last night. It was an unbelievable moment, and they kind of have this thing about them right now where you expect them to do it. I wasn't even that nervous.
And we'll bring in David Samson here, host of Nothing Personal, for Thursday. It's not Thursday without David Samson. David, where do you stand on what kind of jolt Inter is giving for the city, to the other teams in the market? What does it all mean to you right now?
I'm super happy. I'm not the president of the Marlins anymore.
Why is that?
It is the attention that that Inter Miami is getting. I was late to the party. I did not think that Inter Miami, even with Messi, would be able to attract the type of attention or the type of resources that I think they are going to attract and are attracting now. And it is a zero-sum game. It's not as though more corporations are moving into Miami all of a sudden, or there's more corporate revenue, or there's more disposable income. So if they're getting more money, that means somebody's getting less. And for all of the other teams who are pretending how great this is for Miami, it is not ideal for the other teams because something's going to have to give. And we're seeing it with the attention the Marlins get, who are having a great season, who are in a playoff race, and no one cares. And that is very tough to take.
So your thoughts are they're taking eyes away from the other teams, and that's a bad thing.
There's only 24 hours in a day. I didn't say it's a bad thing.
Fandwidth.
Thank you.
I would argue.
Izzy?
I would argue if you're a little late to the party, though, you're right on time. No one wants to show up to a party right on time. Like you've arrived at the perfect. You're not late. Like Eli. Just like 15 minutes late. Perfect.
I watched the game last night, and I had an opportunity. There's all sorts of things I could have been watching, and I was watching Inter Miami play Cincinnati in a cup that I admit I had never heard of. I didn't know what it was. I didn't know what was at stake, and I was watching to see what Messi could do when he's playing against an MLS team. And for the first bit, I actually thought it was just a regular MLS game for the standings. And then I learned and did the research and spoke to Coca to understand what I was watching. But what I'm really watching is trying to see if I can see a memory or history. And in the 98th minute with that pass, and I'm no connoisseur of soccer, but I cannot imagine the skill required to do that. And I love the camera that CBS had where you can just watch him.
Yeah.
And I love the fact it's such a weird sport where you can just walk around.
No.
Think about like on a basketball court.
You can't just walk around. He can.
Right.
That's a big difference. I saw some advice that Messi was giving one of the Academy products, David Ruiz, and he said, "You run too much. Just walk, and the game will come to you." No, Messi, the game comes to you because you're the alpha. You're the guy that everyone knows they need to get the ball to. But he does conserve energy, and that's actually pretty good news for the people of New Jersey that hold tickets to this MLS debut of his that is happening on Saturday. He is playing every minute, and Tata Martino already said that he expects him to play against New York Red Bulls, which is Lionel Messi's proper MLS debut. It's all been cup competitions, which I had a ball trying to explain that to people yesterday.
David, every game he's played has had moments, and this is the first one without his goals. And you talk about who he was playing. That's the team with the best record, right?
Undefeated
in the regular
at home.
season
Yeah.
in Cincinnati, and they're up 2-0 in the first half or early in the second half.
Most dangerous lead in
and
sports.
so it is. It was a moment in itself to have them come back and him serve up those two perfect passes to Campana, which, by the way, talk about a rebound after that, chip and miss from the last one. Yes, they won the game and everything else, but man, that's the way you come back from that.
Well, it's great business, and I'm curious to hear David's input in this. You could already see there's a website that does its best to mark transfer values, and the Messi effect is very real. Players like Campana, players like Robert Taylor, Drake Callender, who's on a provisional roster for the U.S. for a call-up. He's already played for the U.S. men's national team before. Crema is going to get a call-up, and there's a debate as to whether or not he plays for Argentina or the U.S. All these transfer market values are going up because there are more eyes on these academy products like Noah Allen, Crema, and David Ruiz that all of a sudden scouts are paying more attention to. Everybody is really benefiting from the visibility, including opposition.
If you're Don Garber, are you thinking that Inter Miami can do what it's doing in all these tournaments, but still be a last place team in MLS? Does it matter to you as a fan of Inter Miami if they don't make the playoffs in MLS because they've won the cup, they won the League Cup, and they could win this U.S. Cup? Does that make it okay to not be competitive in the actual Major League Soccer?
Well, we talked about this a little bit yesterday, David, and I think part of the reasoning is that, no, you can't just say it's okay for them not to be competitive. But all of these wins in these cup games are telling you, hey, when the season does come back, they're most likely going to make a run as long as Messi is in decent form and doesn't get hurt or anything else. They're most likely going to make a run, and that's the excitement. See if they can make a run to that final playoff spot. Spend the regular season getting to know them, following them, rallying them. And if they make it great, you know that they are probably the hottest team in the league and could win that cup. And if they don't, then you at least have something that sort of drives you to the next season.
So going into next season, I think so. What we're saying is that this year's a pass, but next year in MLS, they've got to be one of the top teams in the table,
Sure.
or else do you view the Messi experiment as being great for business, but didn't have the desired impact on the field?
I mean, it's a long way to go. We have to at least finish this, get to the regular season at this point to see what they look like, because they could be in great form. It could be that these cup games bring the absolute best out of the competition right now. They're seeing Messi for the first time. Not saying that these games are going to get easier, but maybe a little bit less focus from the opposition if it's not an absolute must-win of a game necessarily. I think Messi being on the field probably changes that.
I'm fascinated. Right? I'm fascinated hearing people that aren't necessarily super familiar with MLS and all these different competitions weigh in and prioritize MLS. I'm not even saying that you're wrong. I do think that MLS is the biggest trophy available to them, but you play your league year, your campaign to win trophies.
Yeah.
They're in line to win a double. Excuse me.
Out of cash.
It's emotional
Excuse
for all
me
of
again.
us.
Greece. It's still in my throat. But David, this is the worst incarnation of Inter Miami that we'll see throughout Leo Messi's tenure. And while it's a really deep hole that they have to dig themselves out of in the league, if they do that and make the playoffs and likely upset Cincinnati once again in a first-round matchup, because if they get into the playoffs, they'll probably go in as one of the lowest seeds available. And he does that too when most American fans that don't have a lot of reference points to MLS are saying, well, that's a competition that matters and they're in last place. We've heard that ad nauseum this week. If he does that too, my God.
Yeah, I mean, he's already done enough. I want to read some stuff for David that just sort of shows about the growth that Messi's arrival has created for Inter Miami and MLS. And the question is going to be basically, just knowing this, if they do nothing the rest of the regular season, is it worth it? Okay, this is on an Instagram site called Passionate Income. The MLS season pass on Apple TV Plus saw a subscription increase of twice as much after Messi joined Inter Miami. Tickets are being resold at over 1,700% of their original value. Messi's Inter Miami jersey was the best selling in all of sports in the USA, and their Instagram account's grown over 14 million followers, surpassing any team in the NHL, NFL, or MLB. Any of that worth it to you if you see that already?
So a couple things. Start with the resale price. That is a sort of fugazi. That does not accrue to the benefit of the team at all.
Okay.
That accrues to the people like Mike who spend their workday trying to get tickets and then resell them. So that's nice for fans, but it doesn't help. The jerseys, that's great that he's the number one selling jersey, but when you actually add up what that means in terms of distributions to a team, it's not enough to move the bar. What we really need to see going forward, the Messi effect comes in the values of the assets. So Moss can say all he wants that his team is worth $1 billion now or $1.5 billion. But until we see teams trade hands, and we are seeing an increase in the expansion fees, but I'm talking about the actual value of the teams and what people are willing to pay, the billionaires who are willing to pay. That's when Don Garber gets to do his victory lap and get to the seat of the table with the other commissioners like Silver and Goodell and Manfred. So that's really what I'm waiting to see.
Mike, any truth or possibility of them moving this game? And if they do to a bigger site, then what does that mean for them?
No, there were discussions, and I've also reported that the Moss family feels very strongly about making sure Stephen Ross does not capitalize on this Messi thing whatsoever. They felt passionately about this. So I was surprised when I saw that Moss confirmed to the media that they had exploratory conversations with Hard Rock Stadium to see if they made this final, which they just punched their ticket to, whether or not whether or not that game would be at Hard Rock Stadium. But the team sent an email blast to season ticket holders saying they'd have first dibs on these tickets, and that the game will indeed happen at Drive Pink, which confirmed my earlier report, which is Moss family ain't too thrilled with giving Stephen Ross a single dime from this, because the way that they see it, Stephen Ross has not been helpful at all to their enterprise and has actually stood in the way and presented them some hurdles.
Just under a minute, David. Go ahead.
But I thought that all the owners, they all love each other and they're all here for all of them to get better, and everyone gets along and roots for everybody else.
Yeah, I mean, it's an interesting conversation. We can keep going to it. David, I do want to get back on the other side with you about the Shohei Ohtani injury. He got the elbow ligament tear. He's going to have the Tommy John surgery, perhaps, not even sure. It's not a full tear, I don't believe, but there's so many layers to this conversation with Shohei, given that he's going into free agency, given that he is obviously the best player in the game right now, and given that perhaps one side of the field, one side, that he is obviously the pitcher, he might not be able to do that again. What does that mean for his value? I think this is probably the discussion that David Samson was born for. Am I right, David?
I'm ready.
Yeah, we're all ready. We'll be back with Samson in a second.
Hey, it's Roy from the Dan Le Batard Show with Stugotz. U.S. Cellular knows how important your kids' relationship with technology is, and they've made it their mission to help them establish good digital habits early on. That's why they've partnered with Screen Sanity, a nonprofit dedicated to helping kids navigate the digital landscape. And for a smarter start to the school year, U.S. Cellular is offering a free basic phone on new eligible lines, providing an alternative to a smartphone for children. Start smarter with U.S. Cellular. Visit uscellular.com/built-for-us to find out more. Terms apply. Dan Le Batard.
Amino acid.
Stugotz.
Amino acid.
This is the Dan Le Batard Show with the Stugotz. Presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. DraftKings has all kinds of ways to get in on the action, including same-game parlays, props, live betting, and so much more. Use code Dan when you sign up on the DraftKings Sportsbook app to check it out.
Before we move into that Ohtani conversation, and I'm fascinated by it, there's one more aspect of the Messi story that I want to cover with David Samson. There were owners' meetings at MLS All-Star in D.C., and the Moss family has been really pushing the rest of the league, opening up their coffers and spending. Now is the time. We got Messi in this league. Now is the time to get rid of some of these antiquated rules about designated players and salary caps. Let's go for it. A lot of the new ownership in this league wants to spend money. The Hunt family, for one, doesn't. I've even heard that there's been a sea change in Robert Kraft's approach to it, but a lot of the old MLS guard, that is, to their credit, really navigated some difficult financial waters early on. They're hesitant. Vancouver is a newer team, but they're also hesitant to go full bore into this, and they want a practical, pragmatic, conservative approach while the new ownership wants to go and spend money. It seems as though given the success of international subscriptions, which Messi gets a cut of, and the project overall, and the fact that he's just dominating a lot of these defenses right now, that they have to do something on the field to be successful to stop this team in particular, which, as I pointed out, is at its weakest. Do you think this is going to fast-track MLS, seeing that there's a World Cup in the United States in 3 years' time, 2.5 years' time? Do you think they're going to eschew their conservative ways of financials and go for it?
The proof that they're not is that the revenue that you're all saying is coming into Mas. And I'm also curious, I want to get to why you keep calling him the Mas family. Doesn't Jorge want you to refer to Jorge Mas as the owner of Inter Miami?
He believes it to be a family enterprise. Jose Mas is deeply involved. His son, Jorge Mas Jr., is involved. Like
David Beckham Mas.
Yeah, they view it as a family enterprise.
It's just funny. It used to be David Beckham and then Jorge Mas. Now you're going Mas family. So I guess that's what we're going to go. But the proof is, does Major League Soccer want to become Major League Baseball, where you've got the Yankees and Padres and Mets, or you can just talk about Steve Cohen, where you've got a payroll of $60 million and a payroll of $360 million? Is that really where salary caps work, salary floors work? Keeping the bands between the top and the bottom as small as possible, that is what fosters and breeds competition. What you're saying is that there are people who want to get into the haves and the have-not game, and that is a game that is proven to be very, very bad for on-field competitive balance.
I think people see that stars generate subscriptions, and I understand there are very few stars on the planet that shine as bright as Leo Messi. But they see a real opportunity here to basically microwave a league. And we're seeing this experiment play out in Saudi Arabia. They feel they are well positioned right now. They have the world's attention right now. And they have the United States at their disposal. It's a very attractive media market. And if they stop going for aging players and actually go for players that we're seeing excel in Europe, perhaps even younger players, that there's a real opportunity for them to be taken seriously and creep into that top 5 leagues in the world. Right now, being the biggest league on this side of the planet is a real possibility given the financials that we see down in South America.
You just mentioned Saudi Arabia. Keep in mind, forget the sports washing issue with Saudi Arabia. The real issue with Saudi Arabia is they're not running it as a business. Saudi Arabian teams don't make money. Mm-hmm. And so what you're asking is for owners here in the U.S. to sign up to a model which guarantees loss versus profit. And it's very difficult to find people to do that. So I just don't think it's happening. And by definition, with your comparison, you're actually answering your own question of why it's not going to happen.
David Samson, host of Nothing Personal, here in his normal Thursday spot. And David, one of your favorite topics, player contract negotiations. And you've got the biggest contract on the way that's ever Major League Baseball will have ever seen in Shohei Ohtani's. He's got a UCL injury and will not pitch for likely at least another year. And he's going into his free agency. Wow, what does that mean for him? What does it mean for baseball? What does it mean for this winter?
It's a nightmare all the way around. So let's start with Shohei Ohtani as the greatest player who ever played baseball. That's the theory that we all have, because he's a top of the rotation starter and he's a middle of the order bat. So if he can be Aaron Judge and Garrett Cole, then why isn't he paid Aaron Judge plus Garrett Cole? Right. And that was the plan for him and his agent, that he would get $50 or $60 million a year. And going into age 31, let him sign a 10-year deal. And my problem was, how long can he actually do both at this level? This injury, what it guarantees is, and I discussed it on this morning's Nothing Personal, number one, his free agent deal will include an opt-out, because the only way I would allow him to sign if I were his agent is that he's not going to get paid like both, because he's not both right now.
He is going to have how many years, David?
I would not give it till after 26. He's going to ask for it after 25. But an opt-out after 2 years, all of the money that you're spending, and then you're only getting him for 2 years, is that really worth it to do?
And only one of those years would be him pitching, probably.
So that you're 100% right. He is not going to pitch for the rest of 24. He is likely not going to pitch in 2000 for the rest of 23 and likely not going to pitch in 24. So the first time that he can pitch is 25. But tell me the list of players, and one of them is a former Marlin who is able to pitch after 2 Tommy Johns and pitch effectively. Our old friend, Nate Eovaldi.
Ooh, okay.
That's pretty much the list. It's not Josh Johnson, who tried and had multiple Tommy Johns. It is incredibly rare, and don't mention Daniel Hudson. That doesn't count. For Ohtani to be the best pitcher in baseball after 2 Tommy Johns, it's going to be very challenging. So the likelihood of him being an ace for the next 5 years is de minimis. For the next 10 years, it's absolutely out of the question.
They should have traded him. So the interesting
100%.
David, the interesting part that I look at now when I think about this sort of smaller contract that Ohtani could get, or this contract with opt-outs, is does that mean some of the smaller market teams in Major League Baseball could potentially now get in on trying to recruit Ohtani with the idea of, we'll offer you this massive deal like you guys did with Giancarlo Stanton, knowing very well we won't pay this entire thing. We'll have him here for a couple of years as a gimmick, and then we'll let him opt out. Well, one way or another, this franchise in this theoretical scenario, knowing, hey, if Ohtani is everything that he's supposed to be and he gets healthy, he's going to opt out after a couple of years anyway, and we won't have to pay 10 years, $400 million. So could a team, say like the Marlins, decide, sure, we'll offer the first couple of years will be $80 million to have Shohei Ohtani, but then after that, he's
basically
gone.
Does the injury open up the door for a bunch of teams to get involved in the Shohei deal?
No, I totally understood that question, but the answer is no. And the reason the answer is no is you have to look at what percentage of your total payroll an individual player takes. And when we signed Stanton, we did the math, and at his height, he was going to be at $32 million. And our view was that we would have a payroll of at least $150 million by that time, which would have been right about now. Because the most you ever want to do is 20% for one player of your total payroll. And then you better have a good young team who can supplement in order to really win with the player making that much. And so if your payroll is 150 now and you're paying Ohtani $40 million, that math just doesn't work. So I don't think that he is available to any team whose payroll is below 190 to $220 million.
Well, there goes that dream. Chris actually made a couple of points, good points here. He said, imagine how good the Angels would have felt. I don't know why I said actually there. I'm sorry, Chris.
My head turned a little bit.
I always do it off air, too.
I meant actually because he didn't do it on air. But he said one of the points was, imagine how good they'd feel if they did trade him now and found out about this injury. Also, they need to just work him to the ground and make him less attractive even more for the rest of this year to other teams.
Isn't that what the Angels are they're doing right now? They're trying to make his value as little as possible, no?
Yeah, if I'm Ohtani, I'm not playing the rest of the year. There is no reason. We didn't even mention the fact that Mike Trout went back on the injured list after being off for a day. If I were the president of the Marlins and we did that, you guys would be hammering right now as irresponsible, not knowing how to handle a player or an injury. They let him come back from the same thing that happened to Lowell back in 2003, the broken hamate bone right here when you get hit by a pitch. And he came back for a day and said, oh, it's not worth it. It hurts too much. I'm back on the IL. If I'm Ohtani and I'm Ohtani's agent, I love that he went 1 for 5 in game 2 of the doubleheader and that he came back and hit after he was hurt in game 1 as a pitcher. But it's just not worth it, because if any of his mechanics change and he ends up with any sort of shoulder issue or lower half issue because he has to compensate, even though he was able to come back as a DH after Tommy John earlier than he was able to come back and pitch, he'll be able to do that again. But there is no reason. The Angels are finished. If I'm Ohtani, I love baseball, but no, I'm done for the year.
There's been a lot to cover with David Samson, and we've only really covered 2 topics with him. So we're going to bring him back for an additional segment. But for the 2 minutes remaining in this one, I saw a really sad story revolving Baker Mayfield, who was just named starter in Tampa Bay, and a missing $12 million potentially. And it looks like he trusted his family, and it's a cautionary tale, David.
It is. Baker Mayfield is trying to replace Tom Brady as the number 1 quarterback in Tampa, named starter, and he just filed a petition. The story is that he filed a petition to try to find $12 million that he can't find. I'm not sure how that happens.
Check his jeans.
But exactly.
That
under
is
the mattress.
so much money. When you consider he hasn't made that much money in his career, he hasn't had the big contract. That is
It's the majority of his net worth.
that is a devastating amount of money to lose.
But that's not nearly as devastating as what he is hypothesizing happened to it. The witness list of people who were it's a petition in court. It's not exactly a lawsuit quite yet. It's a petition to understand what happened to the 12 million. But all of the witnesses who are being interviewed, because all of the people who were handling his money were family. And the question is, did his family actually walk away with his money? And it wouldn't be the first time it happens to Gary Coleman. That's a terrible reference you're going to make fun of because people don't know who that is anymore. Does anyone know who Gary Coleman is?
Oh, Gary Coleman.
Gary
I thought you
Coleman.
said
Coleman.
I thought you said Garrett Coleman, who I
What you
thought
talking about, Willis?
wasn't he a Yankee?
Gary Coleman and just another child star who went bankrupt and his parents took all his money, or Britney Spears, whose father used her money and under the auspice of a conservatorship. And if this happened to Baker Mayfield, which he's claiming it did, he's also claiming it's not a distraction, that he's relieved now that it's out in the open and that he can focus on being the quarterback. But when you hear stories about what your family's done to you, it's jarring, it's upsetting, and it definitely impacts your ability to perform on the field.
The most memorable one for me recently was Whitney Houston in her biopic, noting how her dad took advantage and took all of her money. But we'll have more with David Samson on the other side.
Don Le Batard.
Were you guys building out the A-Rod bathroom of your imaginations? Is that what I heard you discussing during the break?
Towels with an A on them.
You know the thing you slide the toilet paper on? That's a baseball bat.
Hey, like that. Stugotz. You think he actually calls it the throne? Probably does.
It's an actual throne.
Yeah, an actual throne.
There's got to be a full-length mirror in there somewhere.
I imagine somewhere in his house he has a replica of David, but with his head on it.
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz.
Presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. DraftKings has all kinds of ways to get in on the action, including same-game parlays, props, live betting, and so much more. Use code DAN when you sign up on the DraftKings Sportsbook app to check it out. David, I want to bring this back to the local ties between Inter Miami and the Marlins. And you mentioned that, you know, as the Marlins team president, you'd be upset that Inter Miami has this much attention and what's been going on here. But I remember a few months ago, we talked about the same sort of concept with the Marlins season potentially not being paid attention to because of the Heat and the Panthers runs in the postseason, and how ultimately there'd be some sort of hangover from sports potentially, and they weren't getting the same amount of attention. And then in July, the Marlins had their highest TV ratings in 3 years for a single month. And now we look at this time with Inter Miami and Messi being here. And in the midst of all of this, the Marlins had one of their highest attended weekend series in the history of the ballpark. So my question is, what is the tie that you're finding between a lack of attention to the Marlins and the success of these other teams?
Wow,
because to me, it seems like when these other teams succeed and have attention, that's just a good thing for any other team in this fan base.
He's smirking like he has an answer to this.
Oh, I'm just smiling. Are you talking about the 100,001 people who came to
Yes,
the
I
Yankee
am.
series?
Yes, I am.
That sounds like a big
100,001.
How could
I
you
was that
announce 100,001
That was me, by the way. I was there for one of those games.
not having bought a ticket?
No, I bought a ticket. I went with my family.
I find it to be very difficult to believe. But the Yankees, of course, are a draw. There's no question. So when you have them in, you are going to get great attendance. But if you're gonna pad attendance, and Major League Baseball has done a great job of announcing increased attendance and all of the great momentum, it's not a coincidence that the new baseball rules are helping, and that you can add to it all of these record attendance, and it's the best attendance in 5 years. It's all part of the PR plan to say, hey, how good a shape baseball is in. I get all that, but ratings. We don't get $1 from a TV contract based on ratings. Not ever. That was not what our TV deal was based on, nor the current TV deal the Marlins have. Whether your ratings are 30,000 people watching or 20,000 or 60,000, it doesn't impact what you're getting from the now bankrupt Bally's.
Sorry, so I wouldn't say financially I was making this argument, I would say that we were all having this conversation about relevance in the market, how much the team matters, how much people are paying attention. And it seems like more people are paying attention to the Marlins because they're good and because there are other teams here succeeding. So there's a bigger appetite for sports. What I'm not understanding is, yes, of course, the bottom line is never going to change on your TV contracts, whether or not more people are paying attention one season versus the next. But it can't be a bad thing for the Marlins that there's been this success in the other teams down here.
If you ask Bruce Sherman, he would tell you that it is not a good thing that Inter Miami is relevant. What we would do is we used to count minutes on the local newscasts. We would count inches in the newspaper, or when things were online, we would count placement, where our articles were, our game articles, whether or not our players were being asked to do features and where those would appear online, what the views and the clicks would be for those. And there was absolutely no doubt that there was a direct correlation between the success of the other teams and the lack of attention and relevance that we were getting, whether we were having a good year or bad, because we would count bad articles as well.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't matter
how much
because you're being talked about.
How much of your data was skewed by the fact that your teams weren't really competitive, though? If the Marlins put a competitive product out there.
That's not true. You had
Jose Fernandez and you had that 1 year, but generally your sample size had you in a fairly irrelevant space.
Yeah, I take umbrage to that because let's go season by season. We were competitive through September in 04 and 05. 06 was one of the great years, even though we had torn the team down and we had that great young team.
It's 20 years ago.
But now go to the Freddie Gonzalez years, then go to Stanton, Yelich, Ozuna, go to the new ballpark, go to the All-Star game. There was always a reason why we were going to be relevant, either positively or negatively. And there was no doubt that the deeper the Heat went, and they were winning all those championships those years with LeBron James, it 100% impacted the amount of attention we got.
I guess the easiest argument to make on Inter Miami's success being bad for the Miami Marlins is that their seasons happen at exactly the same time.
Absolutely.
They're both trying to collect dollars from mostly Hispanic sports fans in the Miami-Dade and Broward County areas. And now there's a consideration for those dollars at Drive Pink Stadium where years prior there probably wasn't.
It's that, but it's also the corporate money. Remember, Miami is a terrible corporate city. And I don't mean a terrible city. I mean, there's not a lot of corporations who do business and who want to be sponsors. If you look at who the sponsors are with the Marlins, we were never able to get the Carnivals, the Burger Kings, the Riders, the ones who are associated with Miami because they're more based on national attention. And locally, it's hard to get those big naming rights deals. Lone Depot doesn't count. That was done because of the big deal they did with Major League Baseball. And so I have feelings about this because I understand how difficult it is for teams in Miami to grab a hold of the existing corporate dollar and having another team in the market. And we're going to talk about this with Vegas. Because if the Vegas A's think that they're all of a sudden going to compete with the Golden Knights and the Raiders, it's the same amount of money available being split yet an extra way. And that's what's happening in Miami. And that's not a positive.
David, we'll get to your movie review in a second, but I wanted to see how you're experiencing the Yankees recently. They just broke a 9-game losing streak, needed Aaron Judge to go absolutely nuts, but there's also discussions about maybe Derek Jeter finding his way back there to replace
Give me a break.
Cashman, maybe? I read that. Come on.
Ohtani baseball?
Come on.
Izzy, I'll tell you right now, if Derek Jeter is named the new general manager of the Yankees, I will work for Meadowlark for the rest of my life for free.
Wow.
Marked.
Why?
Because he has no chance. There is absolutely zero chance that Derek Jeter will be the general manager of the New York Yankees. He can't be a general manager. He doesn't know anything about being a general manager. He can be a community ambassador and eat popcorn in the front row with David Ortiz, but Derek Jeter actually running the business of the Yankees baseball operations department, there's a better chance that I will be the GM of the Yankees.
I don't, David, I mean, that's where being Derek Jeter really matters. It didn't really matter down here, and he took your job.
Now
I'll work for free.
So he's effectively taking your job again.
Contract.
Is this binding?
No, of course not, because it's oral. But in all seriousness, Mike, I hear what you're saying. He's a great name in New York, but being the general manager is not about being a great name. It's the equivalent of hiring Isaiah Thomas to be your coach or president and thinking that's going to, help if you're in Detroit.
That's actually probably about to happen in Phoenix. What's up, Juju?
Speaking of you managing the New York Yankees, just picturing that, what's the most adorable thing you've done this week?
We're back.
The most adorable thing is that my and it's whatever. Look at me, Louie. But my driveway is being paved. It had never been paved before, and I brought out a cooler of waters and candy because it's really hot here, and so I brought out a cooler of water and candy. And it turns out that the workers had no interest in the candy, but a lot of interest in the water.
I thought you were going to say it turns out the workers had like type 2 diabetes and you're offering the worst possible snack.
It's a weird move. The candy.
David,
Candy's the worst.
There's two things that I'm wondering. One is your movie review, and two is how Chris Cody found a way to make it to a Yankee series while also posting videos of Nashville on his IG story.
All right, maybe I was in Detroit. I got mixed up. I wasn't at the Yankee series. Whatever. It sounded good, though.
Your review for the week, David.
There's a movie that just came out with Adam Brody and his real life wife, Leighton Meester. Am I saying that name right?
Yep.
Oh, had such a crush on her.
She's been in a couple good movies, so I get that. So they made this movie called River Wild. And throughout the movie, I'm looking and I'm saying, I don't see Meryl Streep, I don't see Kevin Bacon, but it's about people rafting down a river with a bad guy. This has to be a remake of The River Wild. And I watched the movie.
What gave that away? Terrible. The exact same title?
Except they're claiming it's not. They're claiming, the people who made the movie, it's a reimagining. They're on a river in a raft with a bad guy. What did they reimagine at all?
The year.
Now they're in the future.
Exactly. They like Blade Runner 2096.
They reimagined a far less talented cast.
Way less talented, a way worse movie. I liked the original, The River Wild, which has to be pretty old. I don't know if you guys have seen that movie. It's probably 30 years old by now. But that was at least interesting, and seeing Kevin Bacon in that role was always fascinating to me. But Adrian Brody as a bad guy, absolutely not buying it. And watching him act with his wife, the script was terrible. The story was terrible. The friend actually was decent.
It's Adam Brody.
Who's Adrian Brody? Why is that?
Pat Riley.
He has an awesome nose.
Academy Award-winning actor.
Academy Award-winning from The Pianist. So
Yes.
I got that wrong. Adam Brody, excuse me. So no, I would suggest to you, if you're looking to watch a movie about people whitewater rafting and contemplating being killed, go to the original, The River Wild. And I say that knowing that I don't like when people tell me to watch the original because sometimes it's too old and it would bore me, and the new movie can be better. But in this case, clearly not.
It's multiple reasons why it's called whitewater rafting. Am I right, Roy?
Two Americans.
That's not a race thing.
I don't know.
I mean,
The water's actually white.
I know.
And
that's why I
the
said two
rapids are
reasons.
white.
yeah, but in terms of like the people that do it, I don't know. Gallery, help me out here.
Not me.
Yeah, it's the two Americas.
Mountains.
I've done it one time and I won't do it again. David, thanks so much. Unless you had something else there, I feel like you're about to say something. Did I cut you off? Did I ruin this?
It's like, is Dominique there?
Dominique is not.
I wish.
You think that Juju, okay. Whitewater rafting is the name. It's not about white people or black people or Asian people.
Right.
It's because rapids are white.
I only see white people doing it. Is the observation that I was coming away with.
I've done it, so
That's not helping.
not helping.
You see that?
White woman, white.
See, Lucy's done it. Lucy's white as all hell.
I lived in Iowa willingly.
White is all.
Lucy got sold, though. Lucy cool as hell. She got the good Jordans on today. Salute to Lucy. Show them folks what's going on. Ooh, yes, sir.
I couldn't help but notice that Izzy ran it back with the Miss Picky. The
I
Air
will
Miss
not-
Piggies.
With them Joe Rogan nipples on his feet. That's what he
I
ran it
will
back
not
with.
be shillied.
My favorite whitewater rafting was in Uganda.
Ooh, do tell.
So just as a small FYI,
Uganda's got a lot of white people on it.
there was not one white person on the raft but me.
Did they just call it water rafting over there?
No.
I'm wondering if they probably just call it water rafting amongst themselves.
I mean, look how far you had to go to do it without white people.
Right? Seriously.
I happened to be there.
Thank you for proving our point, David. We'll talk to you next week. Check out Nothing Personal with David
Thank you,
Samson.
David.
See ya.
Don Le Batard.
You getting started on the breakfast flan?
Oh, man, I've been singing the song to myself all morning long. Breakfast flan. Dun-dun-dun-dun.
Stugotz.
Have you never heard the breakfast flan song?
No, hit me with it.
Okay. I wish I had some breakfast flan. Dun-dun-dun-dun. Breakfast flan. Where can I find a breakfast like that?
This is the Don Le Batard Show with the Stugotz.
Presented by DraftKings Sportsbook, one of America's top-rated sportsbook apps. DraftKings has all kind of ways to get in on the action, including same-game parlays, props, live betting, and so much more. Use code Dan when you sign up for the DraftKings Sportsbook app to check it out.
Now, I'm really impressed with how informed Izzy has sounded in this local hour on everything Inter Miami and Messi, because I happen to know that you watched last night's game while also at the movie theater watching Barbie.
Wearing them damn shoes.
You know what? Those two are connected. Thank you for mentioning that, Juju. And thank you for mentioning that, Chris. So I was supposed to go take two of my nephews and one of my nieces to see Barbie. And I'd already seen it, but they hadn't seen it. So I wanted to take them to see it again. Turns out my niece couldn't go. So it's just the three boys, going to see Barbie.
Boys' night.
Yeah, boys' night. Can't be boys' night every night. But we went out. And so there was a point in the movie or during the game or during the movie, I was just like, oh, no, it's Messi versus Cincy. And I sort of grabbed my phone. And it was fortunate enough that the sort of walls behind the chairs, I guess, or people can't see the row in front of you, so I could comfortably have my phone down without bothering the people behind me. So I threw the Inter Miami game on Telemundo with captions and all, trying to practice my Spanish, and watched the second half in the theaters. And then I sort of missed the equalizer because I was taking the kids from the car to my sister's house, and then missed. But it was a heck of an experience. Like, if you have those dine-in theaters, like, you could totally watch something on your phone the entire time.
Just multitask?
100% multitasking.
Multiple screens? Like, were you getting mocked? Because usually it's the kids that have the screen. Like, were you getting mocked by, like, the 7-year-old? Like,
no.
Izzy, what are you doing?
They were right over there. They were doing their own thing. And it was while I was watching the movie and while I was watching Ken proudly is when I decided I will not be shoe bullied by Juju Gotti. And I'm wearing my same, what you call the Miss Piggy's shoes, but I decided to wear it with an outfit that it's more intended to be worn with so that you could just see where the whole game is and you still don't like it.
Yeah, Miss Piggy calls those Miss Piggy shoes, by the way. But on that topic, I have a shameful admission. And I'm in the trust tree and I'm in the trust circle.
Okay.
I don't watch movie commercials. I don't watch trailers because of the deja vu snafu, if you will. So I went to Oppenheimer. I saw Oppenheimer. And the entire time within the first hour of Oppenheimer, I thought he was a superhero. And I was like, why is he letting people talk to him like that? Like, he was imagining, he saw sound waves. I was like, oh, this is a great origin story. And then it got like an hour and a half in. He was getting talked to by those people.
Like Harry Truman's in this superhero movie. This is weird.
Thoroughly let down. I'm the Joker of the year.
When Albert Einstein showed up, you weren't like, yeah.
I was like, ooh.
That must be Nick Fury. Einstein's put it together.
To the rescue.
Captain America.
That's at no point throughout the pop culture conversation surrounding Barbenheimer and Oppenheimer in its own right. Did you think you thought it was
behind him?
Big Christopher Nolan movie, superhero movie, probably.
Right.
You saw the marketing of a dude in a suit walking in front of flames, and you're like, "Yeah, that's a superhero."
That's a Peaky Blinder walking in flames. I'm like, "Oh yeah." Sorry, guys.
That's all right. I like your hat, by the way, old Florida Marlins gear. Which,
Thank you, brother.
Yeah. There's like a potpourri of still some. I'm going to call them national stories with Miami ties because they're not necessarily just local stories. I'm going to let you guys pick one. Which one you guys want to talk about? There's Tua sort of standing up for himself against Ryan Clark. There's Jimmy Butler running out with the ball kids at the U.S. Open, and there's the Marlins ace sort of throwing or beating up I don't know what he beat up, something in the bullpen there, and they're still in the wild card race, so that's why it's a national story. You guys pick which one we talk about.
There's only one way we decide on topics around here.
Is it a wheel?
Yeah, so we're going to spin the
break
wheel.
out the wheel. Go for it.
Juju, tell us what it lands on.
Tua Tagovailoa.
Wow, how'd you know? It didn't even stop when you said it. So do we want to watch this video of Tua? What's he responding to here, Mike? Because Ryan Clark said what? That he hasn't been in the gym getting bigger?
Ryan Clark in, I think, while on ESPN and they were running highlights of the game against the Texans, he said definitively, we know that he hasn't been in the gym, which if you're following Tua's progress this offseason.
It's like the opposite of what has been the case.
Yeah, Tua's famously been going to the gym, but I guess he doesn't have the stature that would make it seem that way. But Tua was asked about it, and he had this to say.
I mean, he probably knows more about me than I know about myself. I mean, I don't know. I mean, Ryan's been out the league for some time, so I don't know. It's a little weird when other people are talking about other people when they're not that person. So I don't know, it's just a little weird. I come back. I like my background is like I come from a Samoan family. Like respect is everything, but does get to a point where, hey, little easy on that, buddy, because I think we're pretty tough-minded people, and if we need to get scrappy, we can get scrappy too. Just saying.
How hard did you work in the offseason?
I mean, I think we all worked hard throughout the offseason. And I'm not someone to talk about myself the entire time, but I mean, it takes a lot. You think I wanted to build all this muscle? Like, nah. To some extent, like I wanted to, I wanted to be a little lighter. There's a mixture of things that people don't understand, that people don't know about, that are talked about, that go behind the scenes. So, I'd appreciate if you kept my name out your mouth. That's what I'd say.
Oh,
I'd appreciate, for starters, if the Dolphins just get a far less hollow table, so that every time he puts his hand down, it is not a stomping. It sounds like there's some, group of horses coming in from behind him. But that is the most tough guy talk we've ever gotten out of Tua.
Most interesting.
Easy on that, buddy, is the hardest of what he offered.
I mean,
get scrappy,
dude. The dismount of keep my name out your mouth. I've actually been paying close attention to Tua's press conferences, and he's certainly a lot more comfortable with microphones around his face than when he entered the league. He also gave a pretty thoughtful answer on being approached by Netflix for the quarterback series. He's maturing as a sports personality, and given that he's got that it factor that the media likes to make him a story, and it's become polarizing, it's good now that we have a personality to go along with this discussion.
It's like the media created, or fans created, that personality because he has no choice but to be defensive.
Yeah. Well, his entire career, I understand why he's been defensive about that, and he's had a lot of adversity to face. Ryan Clark weighing in like that, and the original clip goes on. He compares his body to a woman's, I think, at one point too. Yeah, like it went pretty far for the position that Ryan Clark holds.
Yeah, and it seemed like what he was saying is that Tua was out of shape too thin, that Tua got thick, that he was saying he wasn't following what the nutritionist insinuated that he should do this offseason.
Said he looked like those girls at Onyx.
That's
right?
exactly what he said.
Gentleman's Club.
Yeah.
A Gentleman's Club reference.
Yeah, it was not the best look. The thing that's been interesting with Tua is watching him grow into this confidence. Because remember, when Tua came out of college, despite being the top pick, and being one of those guys who was celebrated even at Alabama, like we all were looking at him as a shy guy coming out of the Saban tree of don't speak. And, we saw his relationship with his parents, and he just seemed like this shy, sort of sheltered kid. And so to watch him kind of being forced into this position, but to come out and be so confident in front of the media and being willing to sort of carry a bit of swagger, the most that he can. I mean, he still said, like, chill on that, buddy.
Mm-hmm. Easy on that, buddy. But I think this is sort of the personality, not just that he would want or that we created for him, but that any quarterback of a team with Super Bowl aspirations has to have. I mean, I think you saw that with Jalen Hurts last year, even before the rest of us sort of granted him the status of, one of the top quarterbacks in the league. He was saying that, acting that way, projecting himself that way. And I think with Tua, as, the gentleman, the nice guy who doesn't actually do that, I think teammates probably want to see this. They probably want to see him fighting back and then getting physical and not being, even on the field, ragdolled around like he was last year.
The staff wanted to see it too, and it harkens back to a conversation that we had with Mike McDaniel last year where he said as much. He saw this diminutive character who didn't really have the support of the staff in place. And then Mike McDaniel, shortly after being hired, he went to a charitable event that Tua's foundation was throwing, and he saw a completely different guy. He saw a charismatic figure. He saw a leader amongst his contemporaries there, and he wondered aloud, how do I tap into this? How do I make you that guy all the time so you can help lead this team? Because there's a difference in personality between the person that I'm seeing at this foundation event and who you are at this facility. And ever since Mike McDaniel's come along, yes, he's gotten older. He's had life events. He has a family now. Tua does. He's got his legs underneath him to a degree. He's already been chewed up by the mainstream news cycle. You're seeing a young man mature in front of the in front of the cameras, in front of the microphone, and hopefully his game can continue to mature, and hopefully he can stay healthy too. Because if he's going to have that personality, I am not going to be as sick of the topic as I was at points last year.
Yeah, I mean, I would argue that it helps that he is being more vocal for somebody like Tyreek Hill, because you don't want him to have to be the voice of this team. You don't want him to be targeted.
Yeah. Remember last year, Tyreek was a guy that was kind of propping Tua up. He's like, oh, he's that guy. And we're like, what are you talking What are you talking about?
Yeah. And the other thing that's interesting with the Dolphins, and we can keep going because I think they are a national story, but there was reports that they're interested in Jonathan Taylor. There was obviously the connection with Dalvin Cook. There's a report out there that they asked about Josh Jacobs, who's not exactly happy in Las Vegas. And to me, that doesn't put more pressure on Tua if they get a star running back, because then they're effectively a super team. And the conversation remains the same. Hey, Tua needs to stay healthy for this team to see its potential. But if that does happen, if he does stay healthy, then there's no question. There's like 14-3 expectations there, and there's like absolute Super Bowl or conference championship expectations.
The Jalen Ramsey injury is a really tough blow.
But being out loaded December, on that side of the ball.
And now Xavier Howard is going through his stuff. There's some pretty bad accusations out there revolving Xavier Howard. You don't know if he's going to be available to them later in the season, given the weight of these accusations. If you've been paying attention, they've been looking to upgrade that backfield the entire offseason and just want the price to be right. And now when you mention guys like Josh Jacobs and Jonathan Taylor, that is a pretty big mountain to climb in terms of asking price. And they're running out of assets. They don't have a third. They don't have a fourth.
I think them having Mike White is very crucial, though, because Mike White is proven a great backup. So I think he can move with a little more confidence this year.
Speaking of backup, don't talk to me. I mean, look, this is not an insult to Raheem Mostert. But everybody who says, oh, he's good enough, don't worry about that, don't talk to me about that. They're not looking after Josh Jacobs or trying to make a trade for Jonathan Taylor if they're satisfied with Raheem Mostert.
No, they have a position for Raheem Mostert, and he will still have a role in the offense, but they want a bell cow. They want a top guy.
White Mike goes water rafting.
Absolutely. By himself, no Tua.
Okay.